Managers, what's the worst thing an employee has done to get themselves fired? One employee was constantly stealing food from the refrigerator that other employees placed in there for lunch and late work night dinners. Eventually, after weeks of complaints, the IT department set up a hidden camera and caught the woman taking 2 yogurts, a Weight Watchers TV dinner, and a can of Coke in one swoop. At another job, a coworker got snippy with the receptionist during an internal phone call. As she clicked the phone, she said, "Darn schmuck." But the click did not disconnect the call. The receptionist was still on the line and said, "What did you call me?" HR would later get involved. It was investigated and the coworker was terminated. I don't understand why more companies don't take food theft a lot more seriously. Like, if this person would steal from the coworkers, they would definitely steal from the company, right? Story 2. I was a newly hired manager at McDonald's. The guy before me was working the cash register. The store was very highly trafficked. It was right off the interstate, right on the border of city and middle of nowhere. It was the first place to stop and get some food for travelers coming in and the last place to stop and get some food for travelers leaving out. It was not uncommon to have over $1,000 in under an hour in the cash register, and policy was to drop money in the safe at least once every hour. So this new guy comes in, works for a few hours, but the manager never did the drops. After about 4 hours, the employee goes to the bathroom and disappears. Turns out he left with over $4,000 from the cash register. Police were called because obviously they have the guy's ID, address, and information on file, only to find out that everything else was false. He stole someone's ID and social security number that looked similar to him and used a fake address. I don't think the police ever found him or figured out who he was. Story 3. Not a manager, but I've been in the restaurant biz for 30 years. The worst I saw was a 40-plus chef hitting on our hostess. I caught him myself. He had her cornered in the dish room with nobody around. Even though he was a full chef and me just a sous and 10 years my senior, I basically kind of fired him. Told him if he didn't leave now of his own free will and never come back, he would be leaving on a stretcher, possibly in a bag. Poor girl was in tears. It's been around 15 years, I think, and it still infuriates me to think about it. She pressed charges, it was all on camera, and he was arrested. Got off light, though, on a plea, which also infuriates me. Got a couple months in jail, not even prison, years of probation, and didn't even have to register on the offenders list, which also infuriates me until this day. He was never a chef anywhere around here ever again, though. You blackballed the heck out of him. Ugh, sorry, had to get that out. Story 4. I read that as dumbest instead of worst and started typing this, so I'll just finish it out anyway. I managed a call center for a while. One of my staff was a 23-year-old guy who just could not figure out how to get to work on time. He had his own car and only lived like 15 to 20 minutes away, but he would perpetually be up to half an hour late shift after shift. We had a generous tardiness/absence policy, 3 strikes for unexcused absences, but an unexcused tardy was only half a strike, and we were nice enough to give him just a verbal warning at least 2 or 3 times instead of starting to count them because the call center wasn't one that had like an inbound call service level. It was just outbound calls, so the time you lost hurt you and other metrics and ended your chance at getting bonuses, but soon enough he had burned through 5 of the 6 unexcused tardiness he was allowed. The last time he was tardy, I brought him into my office and told him this was his final written warning. If he was even a minute late clocking in without a legitimate excuse for the next 90 days, he would be terminated on the spot. That was on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, he was scheduled to arrive at 4 p.m. for an evening shift. He walks in at 4:25 p.m. holding a Starbucks cup in his hand. I couldn't help it. The drive-thru took forever. I took his badge and walked him out. I hope he learned from it. Story 5. I used to run a large food distribution center. The overnight crew was responsible for picking orders for delivery the next day. There was a recovering alcoholic on the night crew who fell off the wagon one night. He snuck out at break and drank a whole 5th of vodka. Once he was back on the clock, he tried to stab another employee for picking the bag of potatoes he wanted for his pallet. A fight ensued and the intoxicated guy ran outside. We found him blacked out in his car with the doors locked. I was worried he might choke on his own wrench, so we called an ambulance. They didn't want to wake him or try to treat him where he had a knife, so we had to wait for the police to show up, break a window, and get him out of the car. Then they took him to the hospital to pump his stomach. Story 6. A salesman tells HQ that his very large national customer wants us to use a specific vendor for a multi-million-dollar contract. We set it up, but have procurement run backgrounds on the vendor to make sure they are reliable, no slave or child labor, etc. After digging down many layers, the founding documents for the vendor came back. It's owned by the salesperson and his sister. It was done quietly to save face with the customer, but the salesperson no longer works here. Story 7. Had a guy who was a recovering substance user. Had all the physical tells, but seemed to have his stuff sorted out in the interview, so I gave him a chance. He was getting clean, so he could get joint custody of his kids. For about 6 months, he was an ideal server, great to customers, never missed an order or anything. Well, court didn't think he did enough, so gave the mother the green light to move out of state and take the kids. Dude showed up to work, dripping sweat, grinding his jaw, everything. I sent him home and said, "You look like you're catching something bad. Don't come to work this sick again." I gave him the out, I gave him the single chance and the excuse. He came into work tweaking a second time and I sent him home. I had a final paycheck waiting for him when he showed up for his next shift. He was clean that day, but I couldn't risk the health of the rest of my staff or my customers. Met him at the door, told him that there was pay for all of his shift as well as for the rest of the week. He didn't argue it. He just nodded, said thanks for the chance, apologized for messing it up, took the check and walked away. Never seen him since. Last I heard, he was homeless and on substances. Broke my darn heart. It's always one of the worst terminations I've done because he knew he messed up, but he also didn't have the wherewithal to be sober without doing it for his kids. And that's the worst because I knew how great of a dude he was, and I also know how none of it mattered in the end. I've fired other people for substances, violence, racism, sexism, theft, you think of it, and in my 2 decades in management, I've probably fired someone for it. I've let go of more people than I can count, but Jesse always sticks out to me as the worst because that dude deserves so much better than he let himself have. Story 8. A married plant manager had an affair with an assembly worker who was the same age as his granddaughter and a mom to 2 very young boys. The girl dated one of the techs who was 12 years older than her and worked at the same plant. The tech found out about the affair and ended her. The company fired the plant manager. Many forklift operators got fired for accidents while under the influence. An employee hit a car in an employee parking lot and fled the scene and never showed up to work. So I guess they fired themselves, though it would make more sense for them to keep working to pay for the damages. A guy took bereavement leave for his grandpa's funeral in the UK, but instead went partying in Jamaica and someone snitched on him, providing social media posts as proof. An analyst screenshot a message from their boss and instead of forwarding it to a significant other, sent it to his boss. His boss was named on his phone as a highly offensive term. Some guy got caught reselling items bought at a sample sale. A professor got forced into an early retirement for drinking on the job and being intoxicated all the time. It took them forever to get rid of him because he was tenured. A professor got fired for engaging in improper relationships with his students. 3 guys, A, B, and C. Guy A would come in the morning, clock out Guy C, and clock himself in, then leave 10 minutes later. Guy B came in the afternoon, clocked out Guy A, clocked himself in, and would leave 10 minutes later. Guy C would come in at night to clock himself in, clock Guy B out, and leave 10 minutes later. They did that 7 days a week. An engineer claimed a ton of overtime but never came to work. She was discovered by an entry-level tech recently promoted from the floor who was sent to her for training on Monday. By Wednesday, he reported he couldn't find her Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. People who should have been fired but never were. A supervisor who slept with the assembly worker. The worker sued the company, claimed the supervisor used his position of power to get her to sleep with him and won money. After that, he slept with another assembly worker. The company got sued again for the same thing and had to pay more money. The guy is still there. A guy who kept coming to work hungover and one Monday threw up in a cooling liquid of a CNC machine that was shared between 4 job stations. The other 3 guys weren't happy. A guy who was working as an engineer without an engineering degree who balanced an automotive assembly line in a way where it was impossible to build anything because he did such a poor job which caused months of delays. A guy who never did anything. He came to work, drank huge bottles of soda every day, and never completed his assigned work. Story 9. I will preface this by saying I'm not a manager and that this individual wasn't fired, but this is probably the craziest work story I have, so I'm rolling with it. I work for a very large Fortune 500 company in tech, 2 employees, a manager, and our director at the time. We're all expecting kids around the same time, so our office threw a baby shower for him. Probably 50 to 60 people attended, including our senior director. We were in this large conference room. The whole thing was impressively catered. They each got diaper cakes, and it was a pretty impressive event for a work baby shower. One of the adjacent teams we work with closely from another office also made a congratulatory video. A lot of effort was put into this. The senior director then leaves the room, and one of the managers that reports to the director having a baby announces he has something for all of us to watch. He airplays his phone to the big screen. The first thing to pop up is a video that has 2 individuals engaging in highly explicit adult activity. The room goes quiet for a solid 5 to 10 seconds, trying to confirm with their brain what their eyes were seeing. Meanwhile, this guy scrambles to get this graphic video off the projector. The room finally erupts in laughter, and that pretty much ended the event. Not only was he not fired, but years later was promoted. Super talented guy, but I still can't believe he wasn't fired or didn't resign. Story 10. Not a manager, but I worked at a university in the department that handles all the aspects of internal construction, maintenance, and moving. One of our fellow drivers got caught engaging in a highly inappropriate personal act in a company truck. I worked at a restaurant where my coworker was fixated to substances and was found passed out in the bathroom. I worked at a supermarket chain and a new store was being opened up. They pulled employees from multiple stores to go assist in its grand opening and training of new employees. One of the managers and an employee who was a friend prior to me working there got caught logging hours for each other in the system when they weren't there, something to the tune of a full month's pay. Story 11. I don't know if worse means dumb or bad, but either way, this is a question for me. They get worse as you go down. For context, because of where I work, all of these acts and crimes were committed by teenagers. Stole pizza and when asked what she was doing, replied, "I'm stealing." Was on track for a minor leadership role when it was discovered that he had been stealing ice cream products all summer. The description of the thief was very specific, and this guy wore the same bright pink hoodie with a giant rose on it every day. Naturally, the hoodie was included in the description. The guy insisted that the girl who reported the thief had him confused with an identical employee who wore the same hoodie. Sold other employees already used employee tickets to guests and lied about it to the general manager. Stole the iPhone of a born and bred New Orleans guy 3 times his size off the desk of the HR manager. He then refused to give the phone back when the guy he stole from and his big brother knocked on his door, tracking him down with Find My on iPhone. My almost assistant manager engaged in a relationship with a teenaged employee. The assistant manager was pretty young himself, probably 18. The girl was really into him and had been going for him, but when it didn't work out, she got upset, her parents noticed, and called us. We had to fire both employees. Threw a makeshift shrapnel bomb at another employee who put her arm up to block it. The bomb, a sealed metal water bottle with dry ice that had been inside for hours, exploded on contact with her arm, causing a severe injury and hitting another employee in the head. The bomb was accidentally created by another employee, dry ice in a metal water bottle. Stole a car under the truly mistaken impression that he was borrowing it and allowed to do so. He took another employee in said car to go get food with himself driving, despite the fact that he had no license or permit. He thought a school ID would suffice. He then went about 60 down a 30, swerved from one ditch to the other, and totaled the car in the ditch outside the place of employment. Story 12. Had one of my very well-liked and hard workers leaving the state. He'd done everything needed to do with HR, 2-week notice, started returning issued items. On his last day, a store manager trainee got a bug up his butt because this guy didn't have an issued item with him. The dude explained the above, "Today's my last day," etc. The manager trainee didn't want to hear it at all. My guy gets the, "Darn this stuff, I'm out," look, jumped on a forklift and drove it across a parking lot to the Taco Bell drive-thru and bought a last meal. Parked in the middle of the parking lot and ate his burritos. The manager trainee lost his mind. My dude just smirked and tossed his company-owned stuff at his feet as he drove by, parked the forklift, and clocked out. Still makes me smile to this day. Story 13. It pales in comparison to many stories here, but I figured I'd share. I brought in a contractor who was super eager to get a foot in the door at the company I worked at. Due to company policy about this team, we were only hiring in-state. It was the first thing I brought up in the interview. It was reiterated by his contract firm multiple times. Day 2, we hop on a Zoom call. The guy dials in with a tropical beach in the background, not a fake background. Me, "Hey, where are you?" Him, "Costa Rica, man. Just got here late last night. It's gorgeous." Me, "When are you coming back to the States?" Him, "I rented this place for the month, so probably after that, but I might hit up Portugal to see a buddy for a few weeks first." Me, "Okay, well, you were told multiple times that you were required to work within the state, so you're fired. I'm going to have your account deactivated immediately. Turn in your laptop with your firm when you get back to the US. Him, "But my permanent address is still there." Me, ... Story 14. One of my former chefs got intoxicated and probably spiked on shift. Smashed a door, tried to fight the GM, left on his bicycle but fell off of it on the driveway, which no one knew. I came to work not knowing there was an issue the night before to find the guy's stuff all over the driveway. Papers, filters, a grinder, a smashed alcohol bottle, his garments, and a few other bits. I cleaned it up on my way in. He's not there yet, so I start to prepare breakfast and I ask what the heck has happened the night before when I find the door. He finally comes in late at 7:30, wounded all over my kitchen from an open wound in his leg and is wearing shorts. I fired him for gross misconduct. This isn't even really all the stupid part. The guy, so off his face on whatever substances he's been on, proceeds to forget that I fired him and comes into work the next day. And I'm in utter disbelief when he comes in and I have to fire him for the second morning in a row. Story 15. This one bartender called in to see if her bartender buddy that night wanted to swap in times and cut times. She was asking him to close for her so she could leave early as she was sick. We expected a slow night, so he told her to just stay home. All good, he's got it covered. We then watched her go into the bar across the parking lot in her work shirt. One of our crew was off shift but hanging out. He ran over to see what was up. The woman acted like nothing was wrong, ordered him a shot, and did one with him. This was not her first offense. She was 23. Nobody likes you when you're 23. Story 16. Had a barista at a college campus coffee shop we were having issues with. I was trying to reach him via phone, no answer, so the director went over to check on him. He gets over there are a few students standing around with a mix of horror and amusement on their faces. The guy is missing, but his phone is sitting on the counter, blaring explicit material at max volume. Turns out, while no one was in the shop, he decided to view some material, shut himself in the storage room to engage, and in his haste, left his phone on the counter. The director calls me up and says, "You're never going to believe this." He was union, and they tried to fight to get his job back by claiming a medical issue and asking the company to pay for him to go to rehab. They declined. Story 17. I once had an employee complain about how they thought they were shorted a raise from a few months earlier, so I had the company look into it. They found out that it was a bit of a gray area for a few employees. They were hired right before the raise was issued, but the company decided to go ahead and give them all the raise immediately, as well as back pay them from the date the raise would have been issued. When I informed the employee of this via text message, they didn't show up for their scheduled shift and were going on vacation for 2 weeks after that day. They proceeded to blow up my phone with message after message of some pretty threatening stuff, threatening lawsuits for wage theft, lying to them, among other things. The person basically went absolutely nuts for the entire 2 weeks of their vacation. I never responded to a single message, just let them rant. I always have the schedules posted 3 weeks out, so when they called while I was out of the office, an employee told them when they worked next. The helpful employee had customers to deal with, so told them to wait a second, and the angry employee got rude, so they hung up the phone on them. The angry employee called back, and the helpful employee told them when they worked next quickly, but the hateful person said they needed to write it down, so tell them again when they get a pencil and paper. The helpful employee showed great patience and did as they asked. The disgruntled employee then continued to text hateful things to me for the next week leading up to the return. Come said return date, and my boss and I were there, waiting just in case something got nasty. When they showed up, they just ranted about how they were stolen from and how they were going to sue us. It eventually led to them flipping me off in the office when I called them about their wrongful accusations. They were suspended at that point and told not to return until notified. 2 days later, they were back in the store demanding a bunch of disposable vapes they said they had there. They must have thrown away months ago because I could never find them. They thought I was lying, so they called the cops on me. The cops came and I explained the situation to them. They told the employee to leave, so they eventually left. This turned into them refusing to come back for a disciplinary write-up. They said they didn't want to get arrested since we already called the cops on them once before. I reminded them that it was them that called the cops, but they said I was lying again. They instead tried to do the discussion on the phone, but they refused to listen to the write-up. At that point, we considered them a voluntary quit and washed our hands of them. Last I heard, they were threatening to sue the police as well. Kind of weird how they kept saying they had a lawyer telling me to do all of this, and yet we never spoke to or saw said lawyer. Also, this was all at a convenience store, not some big-time, high-paying job. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 18. My husband used to be the GM of a Wingstop. He had hired a new employee. They were a transgender man. Not a big deal, but it is relevant to the story. Anyway, when setting up their info in the system, their ID reflected their dead name, and my husband was sure to advise that they needed to provide their legal name on documentation for tax reasons and as not to cause any payroll discrepancies. He also assured him no one would know or refer to them by their dead name. It was strictly legality business. The employee filled out the paperwork using the updated name anyway and assures my husband that he had the legal paperwork with a legal name change, but just needed to go to the DMV. So the employee starts working and all is well. Payday rolls around, my husband happened to be off that day, and this employee started blowing up his phone. Apparently, they could not cash their check. Turns out they lied about the legal standing of the name change process. They start getting erratic and demanding something to be done immediately and blaming my husband as if he deviously did this on purpose. My husband reminded them of their prior conversation and told him when he went into work the next day he would be happy to update the system and a new check would need to be issued. This did not satisfy the employee, and they started berating and physically threatening my husband and others at the store if he didn't seemingly wave a magic wand and fix everything immediately. This was also at like 5 or 6 p.m. The threats got so unhinged that my husband immediately fired them, hung up, and called his boss and told him what was up. The employee was also banned from coming to the store or police would be called. As for the check, the employee would now have to wait to receive the check by mail, which would take several days longer than waiting until the next day as originally expected. My husband had a hammer below the cash register to protect him and the store in the event they were going to make good on their threats, but thankfully, nothing happened. Crazy, right? Story 19. I currently manage software engineers. If you've ever worked with engineers, they can be a different breed. I haven't necessarily had a bad experience with one, but have definitely met some characters. I hired a guy, he aced the interview, it was virtual, his resume was great, had excellent references. My team alternates between 3/2 and 2/3 in office days, and this guy had worked remotely since 2011, and on his first day, it darn showed. Before I even got into my office, I had 4 complaints about this guy's body odor. I wasn't really sure what to think until I got there and shook his hand. I nearly fainted. I never smelled body odor like that in my entire life. I immediately asked him to come outside with me because I didn't want him making the office smell bad. I asked him what was going on, if he had a medical condition I needed to be aware of. He had no idea what I was talking about, so I told him point blank he smelled terrible. He was shocked and couldn't believe it. I asked him to take care of it and gave him the rest of the week to work from home to get it taken care of. A week goes by and he comes into the office. Immediate complaints from people. One colleague threatened to walk out. I asked the guy again what the deal was and he told me, well, I sprayed Febreze on myself before I walked in. My jaw almost completely dropped. Apparently, this guy hasn't showered in literal years and just washes himself with water from his sink once a week. He also smokes cigarettes and apparently only eats 1 meal a day and drinks IPAs for dinner. I asked him again to take care of this or there would be conversations with HR. Conversations with HR happened, as you probably guessed. He was eventually terminated, but one thing he told HR was that he was not sure how to properly shower, and he asked for guidance. Story 20. Lots to choose from, but this was one of the first that I became aware of, way back when the internet was being introduced as a quote-unquote business tool. And prior to any formal policies being established, there was a guy in a private office who discovered that the internet was full of explicit content. Not only did he like viewing it, but he had a habit of printing it to his adjacent desktop printer. All is good until his printer broke and tech services took it away for repair and redirected his print jobs to the central printer located next to reception. So the next day, while browsing, he finds something he likes and hits the print button, but instead of the familiar whirring of the printer starting up, he realizes his mistake. He then attempts to casually walk up to reception to retrieve the printouts only to discover nothing in the tray. Instead, one of the secretaries is holding the printout, asking him if he is looking for something. He was fired the next day. The thing was, as there was no policy in place at the time of his indiscretion, if he fought the dismissal, chances are he would have won. Story 21. It was grease trap day at the salad joint. If you don't know, the dishwashing sink was set up to collect grease and oil so they don't go into the water system. Eventually, this quote-unquote trap needs to have its collection dumped. That absolutely is one of the most disgusting and vile-smelling things you will ever experience. I had a new guy that had been there for around 2 weeks and we needed to clean the grease trap and transport the viscous liquid to the grease disposal spot. We got it all in a few 5-gallon buckets filled to the brim. He grabbed 2 at once and on his way out of the kitchen and into the dining lobby, he dropped them. Both of them. That liquid went absolutely everywhere, running back into the kitchen, under tables, seeping into the baseboards and walls. I was absolutely astounded by the mess. This wasn't just something you could mop up, it was gallons of the most foul, slippery substance imaginable. The smell was totally atrocious. I said, dude, we have to figure out how to clean this up. And he said, okay, I'll be right back. And he didn't come back. I waited around 15 minutes, called him and left a voicemail. You're fired. I spent a few hours using various cooking sheets to scrape it up and dispose of it. I then mopped the remainder off the floor with whatever chemicals I could find. Pretty sure I took the finish off the floor. My shoes and pants were completely stinky and ruined, and I had to take the bus home, which took longer than an hour. The owner gave me $100 the next day. We decided to hire professionals from that point on, but funnily enough, the guy that came and collected it accidentally spilled the thing in his darn car. Story 22. I'm a manager for a cardboard company. 3 months ago, an employee got fired when he rushed into the office and was about to hit another employee. The reason, as it turns out, was because the second employee had kissed the first employee's fiancée a while back. Luckily, a third employee who volunteers as a sheriff had his pepper spray on hand. He took down the first employee with the pepper spray. Crisis averted. Needless to say, we fired the belligerent employee. For a good while after, the female employees in the office kept asking about how the volunteer sheriff took down the first employee. Story 23. I asked them about their skill set and experience when they were transferred to me, as I was told they were underperforming. I asked specifically about things they said they could do on their resume and from their interview, not mentioning why I was asking. They plainly stated they had no experience in any of those things, ended up letting them go within the week. My guess is they had someone write their resume for them and studied common interview questions, but no idea how they even got through the interview stage. Pretty sure the person who interviewed them got let go eventually too, though. Story 24. Hired a Romanian guy. After 4 weeks of him shadowing someone, he starts working on his own, and his work was terrible. After a week, I had him into the office with another manager to have a chat and see if he understands what he's meant to be doing, if he needs more training, if he feels he needs a couple more weeks of shadowing, etc. Throughout, he says no. I ask him if he's certain. He says yes, so I bring up the previous week's work and tell him he's not in trouble, not to worry as he's new, but it wasn't up to standard. So if he thinks he needs more training, just say so and we can sort it out. He says no. Another week passes, work isn't good enough, so I take him in again and go through the same process of asking if he needs any help understanding what he needed to do. Again, he insists not, so I said to him if I don't see an improvement, I'll have to go down the performance management process, as his work isn't up to standard despite him insisting that he knows what he's doing. He starts kicking off, shouting and swearing, called me and the other manager an offensive name. We both looked at each other like, what the heck? We've given you plenty of opportunities to say you need more training. And he wouldn't calm down, so I said to him to go home, stay home, and he'll receive a letter in the next couple of days to invite him to a disciplinary meeting because it's unacceptable, and he swung a punch at me. We took that as his resignation, and he never came back. Story 25. I used to work for a large retailer that had all its employees take an annual anonymous job satisfaction survey on the computer. Although the survey was supposed to be tamper-proof, the store manager somehow was able to change the results before sending them to corporate headquarters. He would have been able to get away with it except for the fact that he changed the results too much. As altered, the survey showed that every employee in the store was 100% satisfied with their job. Headquarters management immediately saw this was completely impossible, launched an investigation, and the store manager was soon an ex-manager. Story 26. My stupid sister lied her way up to get an engineering manager job at a boat manufacturer company. She has absolutely no education higher than a GED/high school diploma. However, the boat company decides to give her a company credit card upon hiring and a bunch of projects for her and her team to work on. She has no idea how to do the projects because she is not an engineer, has no idea how to manage a team as she never managed people before. She doesn't show up to any project meetings, so the team she was hired to lead never knew what to do. Time goes on and the employees that are left hung up with no leadership on what to do start complaining. The boat company finally tracks her down and turns out she was traveling around the US sightseeing and spending money at high-end restaurants. She was fired, rightfully so. Not sure if she had to pay anything back or was charged with anything. Sure hope she was, though. Story 27. A few years ago, I started a new job. Pretty standard desk work, not too hard, but not the kind of job you get if you haven't already worked in an office environment. First day, I go into HR with my documents, and the nice lady onboarding me tells me we can get started after the other guy who's onboarding with me. Tim comes back with his I-9 documents since he'd left them at home. Not a great first impression at your new workplace, but I guess stuff really does happen. Tim gets back and we chat a bit. He's polite but seems a little slow and off, and I chalk it up to first day nerves. We go to the production floor, meet our manager, get settled into our desks, all that. Our seats are 2 to a cube, so he's basically right behind me the whole time. Over the next few weeks as we're training, I'm noticing I'm picking up the work pretty quickly, but he isn't. There are several sessions where Tim's manager is having to sit for an hour or more showing this guy over and over how to navigate our systems, which aren't really confusing at all. At some points, it seems like the manager is having to remind Tim how to close windows and tabs in his browser. After another couple of weeks, Tim is gone. Not too much of a surprise, but I'm alarmed when our managers tell us that if Tim tries to contact us on social media, we should block him and let them know. And then the next day, the managers advise us to not leave the building or go out to our cars alone until further notice. So what apparently happened was that Tim had initially interviewed for this position by phone and he really blew away the managers. Great resume, answered all the questions well, really engaging and friendly. When he got the offer, he moved with his entire family across the country to start this job. And then he walks in on his first day and within a few hours, the managers realize something isn't right. This guy doesn't sound like he did on the phone. He doesn't really understand the work at all. He's not really keeping up in the training. So they pull him aside to ask what's up, and he admits almost immediately is that the person they talked to on the phone interview wasn't him. He had coached a friend on what to say and had paid him to do the interview for Tim. Now, any decent company or any competent set of managers would have let Tim go immediately, but I suppose they started feeling guilty when Tim said he had moved his whole family across the country for this job, and they tried to make it work. But clearly he was struggling the entire time and simply couldn't learn the work, and after a few painful weeks, they gave him the boot, and apparently in his termination meeting, he had started mouthing off at the managers, which led to security discreetly escorting him out of the building. But it didn't end there because apparently that night, after the managers informed us Tim was gone, he decided to send threats to the managers on LinkedIn saying he was going to come back to the building and do who knows what when we were all at work. I don't know if the police were involved, but thankfully everything seemed to settle down without anything much happening. I have so many stories to tell from this particular company, but this one was a memorable start. Story 28. Not a manager, but HR here had a male employee who would heavily flirt with a female coworker to the point of causing disruptions in training classes and meetings. Stop his work vehicle next to this employee at a work site where she was sitting due to not feeling well. He offered to drive her to the sector office, which she accepted, then offered her an aspirin and water, which unfortunately she also accepted. So yeah, he spiked her on the job in a work vehicle at a work site. Thank goodness she demanded to be let out of the truck when she realized she was feeling really strange, and he actually complied with her request to let her out. Story 29. I was a manager at a well-known restaurant as a university student. We hired and trained a 20-year-old girl with some prior experience serving. She often made mistakes like putting in the wrong items or forgetting to put her orders in. The last straw was when she accidentally gave a table an appetizer they didn't order. The table already ate half of the appetizer when she realized her mistake. So what did she do? She grabbed the half-eaten appetizer from the table and gave it to the table that ordered it. They were next to each other. She said she was embarrassed to make another mistake. That's why she did that. Story 30. Stealing his lunch off the floor. We literally watched him go from point A to point B with no stopping by checkout. He lied to two of us. Then when the store manager came by, giving him one last chance, that was it. The dude was told point blank he could go pay for it. He lied to two of us, so the general manager stepped in and fired him on the spot. It was like a $4 item, and he got paid better than most. The dude threw away a very easy full-time gig over a piece of smoked salmon in the middle of the pandemic when getting a decent job was next to impossible. Story 31. I was training new hires on how to deal with hazardous materials in a warehouse, and this guy kept falling asleep during the videos. I reminded them they needed to pass the test in order to keep their job, allowed them to go get coffee halfway through. It was 2 a.m. I get being tired, but they signed up for that shift. I kept asking some of the test questions throughout the videos to make sure they were paying attention. He took the test 3 times and failed all 3 times, then accused me of being racist and got really unprofessional with me. I ended up taking his badge and another supervisor walked him out. Story 32. An employee of mine unknowingly committed insurance fraud. She had a minor workplace injury, so I had her fill out all of the necessary incident forms and informed her that she had the option to see one of our medical providers for workplace injuries. She said that she was going to leave for the day to go see them. I turned in the forms to HR so they could do whatever they needed to do. The next day, HR comes to me and asked me to clarify which provider the employee went to because they said they couldn't find any record of her visit. So I went to the employee to ask her, and she just told me that we could forget about it and it wasn't really that serious. I told the HR director what the employee told me, and she immediately calls the employee up and confronts her. The HR director lays it into her and tells her she already filed the claim with our workers' compensation, workman's comp insurance, and it would be very bad if she lied about going to the provider. The employee comes clean and said she just wanted to go home for the day. She was fired on the spot by HR, not by me. Story 33. I hired a dude that was down on his luck, just got out of jail, just had a kid. For a while, he's doing good, and he's getting along with everyone. One employee throws a Halloween party, and the dude gets absolutely wasted and makes a fool of himself. The employee throwing the party asks him to leave, and the dude punches his coworker and ends up in jail. The dude gets released, and we negotiate a return to the job with the consent of the person who got punched. Everyone felt bad for the dude despite everything. The dude spiraled a bit but didn't really do anything to get fired. Then he shows up intoxicated, and I have to fire him. Like 2 days later, he takes the cops on a high-speed chase with his kid in the truck. He's in prison now. Story 34. Someone quit and sent out a mass email to the department of 500 plus people detailing all the issues. Well, this guy on the team makes a meme about this incident, documenting all the managers' responses, and makes fun of all of them very poignantly. Too much so, including making fun of a VP who took down the network torrenting adult content, which was a secret that wasn't supposed to be known. It's just an edit of The Onion, but well before memes were a thing. He's nervous, so sends it to a handful of people from an anonymous account. Because it's anonymous, someone thinks it's the original guy who quit. So it gets passed up the ladder and back down, and it's discovered that it came from this guy or his coworker. By the end of the day, they are both walked out the door even though one of them had nothing to do with it. Just 2 20-year-old kids being dumb. Both talented, both gone. Worst thing is that it was accurate and caused an entire restructure with the VP gone and their manager getting promoted and having to move his family across the country. This is really just a story about me and my stupid mistake that got my friend fired and ended up causing my boss to move his family to central Illinois. Though I still talk to my old boss. I had beers with him and his wife a few years back when they visited where I live now. And if any of these stories got to YouTube, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.